This is Brian, ScreenFire.com and review. What I'm looking at today is 2018 Suspiria, directed by Luca Guadagnino. This is a remarkably divisive movie in some ways, in the sense that it's based on Dario Argento's original Suspiria, and it does things with it that are fascinating in some ways and really uncalled for in others. For instance, this is a slow movie. It takes its time. I want to say it lasts at least 2 hours. It feels longer, but it at least lasts 2 hours. And the thing is, it reminds me very much of 2001: A Space Odyssey, which when I saw it was quite possibly the most boring movie I had ever seen in my life. I kid you not. I could not stand that movie when I first saw it. But as I grew older and I rewatched it, I saw that it had a reason for its length, and it was telling us something. It was taking its own leisurely time to do it, but it was trying to tell us something. Suspiria is the same way. It's talking about political upheaval. It's talking about the climate that the movie takes place in. And it's interesting. But at the same time, what is not right about it, at least in my opinion, is that it forgets that Dario Argento's original was not a think piece type of movie. My God, this is the father of giallo. And so his original Suspiria was a horror film for the most part. And it wasn't a terribly intellectual film. And that's not a criticism, by the way. Not every movie needs to be a 2001: A Space Odyssey or the reboot of Suspiria. So this brings a lot of stuff to the table that the original did not touch on at all. And honestly, I'm curious as to why it did it. Don't get me wrong, once I got used to the pacing, I enjoyed Guadagnino's reboot. But at the same time, I don't know why it was. It's not a bad film, but there's not a lot of reason for it to be, other than someone wanted to remake Suspiria. And I don't know how Dario Argento felt about this, but I get the feeling he was not keen on it. And I can see why. Guadagnino has taken essentially a slasher movie with supernatural overtones and changed it to this sprawling, almost political in a sense of politics, but also in the way people interact with each other, epic. And Suspiria was never meant to be an epic. It's like if someone would do this with Friday the 13th, which, by the way, is a really good movie. If you haven't seen the original Friday the 13th, please watch it. It's actually a lot better. It's gory as hell, to be sure, but it's not as silly as its follow-ups. And it's a really good movie, and it's an effective thriller, and it gets a lot of bad press because of the gore. But in any case, I'm talking about Suspiria. And Guadagnino's movie is more of an art film than the original. And in some ways, that's a pity. It's long and way more involved than it needs to be. It's enjoyable, but you have to understand that the movie is going to tell you its story on its own terms. You cannot rush this movie. It's going to proceed how it proceeds. And if you watch it, don't watch it in bed. If you do, you will probably fall asleep. I don't think there's a lot of extraneous footage in this movie, but at the same time, this is not the way I would treat Suspiria. Suspiria needs to be more in line with what it is, which is essentially a giallo, which is essentially a thriller with supernatural overtones, which this movie has. But it's so full of other stuff that it becomes its own animal entirely. It's not a bad movie, to be sure, but it is not for everyone. I suspect most people who see this version of Suspiria will find it incredibly boring. And I'll be honest, initially I found it incredibly boring, but I had to watch it again. Yeah, Glutton for Punishment, sue me. I had to watch it again to take in all it was talking about. And it's talking about a lot. It's a very heady movie. It's a very pretentious movie, as I said earlier. Needlessly pretentious, but it's not a bad movie. And it is what the director planned to make of it. So, as a directorial vehicle, Suspiria is a fascinating movie. As a movie in and of itself, if it's your cup of tea, then it's probably a good thing. If not, you will probably not like this movie. It requires a lot of commitment. There are lots of scenes you will watch that you will say to yourself, as I did, this could be cut. Why is this here? And the finale is pretty gory, but it's nothing you haven't seen before, and I don't know, honestly, it's worth sitting through the bulk of the movie to reach it. And the dance scenes, some of them are just so dated. I understand that it's a period piece actually, before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I understand that it's not supposed to be evocative of now. Not really, at least not its visual aesthetic. But at the same time, it came out now, and some of the costumes look dowdy, and some of the dancing is just not that interesting. But all in all, the reboot of Suspiria is fascinating, but it's a movie that requires commitment. It's a movie that you have to accept on its own terms. So either you're going to give it the space and the time it requires, in which case you'll probably have a favorable opinion of it, or you're not, in which case you are not going to like it. And not only are you not going to like it, you'll probably be bored stiff by it. It's also a movie that's needlessly gimmicky, in that you have Tilda Swinton playing dual roles. There's no reason for her to play dual roles except for movie. It doesn't really have any bearing on anything. I would call it like a vanity project, like when you have a movie with Eddie Murphy playing 12 parts. Except for the fact, I don't think it's that. But to be totally honest, I don't know what it is. And I don't know why it's happening. She does well in both roles, but there's no reason for her actually playing two roles. So it's a little confusing, to be totally honest. It's still worth watching. It's on Amazon. If you have that, take a look at Suspiria. And I repeat, I know I'm getting repetitious about this, but I have to repeat, judge it on its own terms. If you apply more traditional metrics to this movie, you are going to hate it. You're going to not only hate it, you will despise it. And that's assuming you sit through it all. If you let it work on its own terms, like with Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, I don't know if you necessarily will like it, but you will respect it, and you will understand what the director is trying to do. And that perhaps is worth the watch. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Peace.